Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd. I'll be your host for the next hour of Good Gardening. If you'd like to submit a question to the panel, dial 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Toll-free number is 800-676-5446. We take your emails and pictures for a future show. That address is byf@unl.edu. Give us as much info as you can. Make sure you tell us where you live. Attach those pictures as JPEGs, please. PDFs don't work. So Backyard Farmer is also available on the web. That's our social media stuff like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. We like to start with samples. I assume, Wayne, the gloves are for some purpose.
That's right, and it's not trying out for the Blue Man Group.
All right, what's up?
Oh, no, I brought my son's pet caterpillar tonight. This is his pet Carly.
Okay.
And it is an American dagger moth. And this particular caterpillar does have some irritating hairs compared to some of our other more fuzzy, lovable caterpillars. People with sensitive skin can get irritations from this, a stinging sensation. It's not the full-on urticating hairs of like the Io moth or one of our other ones that can do that. So that's why I'm wearing the gloves, because I don't particularly want to be itching all night while I'm on the show. You can tell this one apart from a lot of the other caterpillars. It's fuzzy. It has either a pale white to this orangish color, and then it has these tufts of black hair coming out. There's 4 up front and then one long one here in the back, and that's how you tell it apart. Yeah, he's not real happy with me touching him. As you can see, he's rearing up. And when these get ready to pupate, they will chew into the side of wood and make a chrysalis and cocoon in that crevice that they excavate out. We even had a picture one night a year or two ago on the show, and this is one of the likely culprits.
Excellent.
From that.
Excellent. You can put him back in the box. So
I will put him back in the box so he doesn't escape, because my 4-year-old will be very upset with me if he doesn't come home alive.
All right, thanks, Wayne. All right, Bill, this is Grass 101, right?
Grass 101. I understand it can be really frustrating sometimes when you submit a sample of a grass and I say, I don't know what it is. And it's not just because I probably don't know, but because it is difficult to tell from just a picture from 5 feet up. And even just a picture of going something like this and just showing this grass, it's not really going to help me to just see this. So if you're going to send a picture in, just some things that I need to see when I'm trying to identify my grasses. So let's look at this one first. This is goosegrass. I think Matt showed us off last week. I'll get it in frame here. Things we'll look at first, seed heads. If you got a seed head, picture of a seed head is fantastic. So we can see the seed heads here, the goosegrass. That's one thing that's gonna really help out. Then what's gonna come, I'm looking for in these grasses, I'm gonna look down at where the leaf comes off of the stem. This is really like the spot at which we can start to sort one grass out from another. So things I'm gonna notice on this is that the leaves are folded, they're not rolled, and so it's kind of, if you roll it through your fingers, it won't roll. So that's one thing that's distinctive about goosegrass. I have another grass here that I'll pull up really carefully, and this is a level of detail that I need. If you look right where that leaf is coming off of that stem, I'm looking for these little things called auricles, and they're just like little fingers that are going and wrapping around the stem. Some grasses have it, some grasses don't, and so those are other things I'm looking for. And then finally, I'll look for hairs, and so I'll pull the leaf back, and I'll look for this little membrane here that may or may not be there. It can be membranous, it can be hairy, or it can be absent. This is called the ligule. So it really takes me to look at all those different features to be able to clearly say, is it, this grass or that grass? So if you're getting a picture sent in, put it on white paper like this, try to get some good, clear pictures of where the leaf is coming off the stem, and we'll have a much better probability of figuring out what that grass is.
Excellent, thanks, Bill. All right, are we having dinner or what here, Kyle?
Well, here, maybe should have saved this one for Backyard After Dark, since we're going to start talking about smut, everyone.
Oh, brother.
And luckily, it's everyone's favorite kind of smut, corn smut. So I was happy enough to get some roasting ears the other day and started to unroll them, and I saw this big old gray mass growing on it. And this is corn smut, also known as a Mexican truffle. They are perfectly edible. But really, as far as control of these guys go, they won't negatively impact the overall health of the corn, of your ears. You can't just pluck them off and continue to roast the rest of the ear. We always talk about control, and whenever people ask me about how do you control this one, no one's ever really happy with my answer, because you must go into every cornfield within probably a 5-mile radius and find every corn smut gall and remove it. Because what happens is these things dry out, and then the spores end up splashing and being windblown really all over for quite a few miles. But nice thing about this guy is it is actually a delicacy. And so if we were in Mexico, we could fry this up and just call it huitlacoche, and you can just go ahead and eat it.
You didn't fry it first.
Didn't fry it first, but here you can see we have all the nice black spores on the inside, and as they dry out, these things just kind of become powder and will blow through the wind. Anyone else hungry?
Tastes
yeah.
like chicken?
Not quite, not quite.
And now your teeth are black. All right, thanks, Kyle. Sarah, how can you follow that one?
I'm not going to eat this. So we've been getting a lot of questions lately about trees that are having trouble, and it can be deciduous trees like this buckeye, or it could be evergreens like mostly spruces are the questions I've been getting questions about. So the symptoms that people are seeing are scorching of the leaves, as you see on this buckeye sample. In some cases, all of the leaves on a branch have completely dried out and died. In the case of evergreens, the needles turn color. They often turn kind of a reddish brown, a dark reddish brown color, and they fall. What these all have in common is they're all heat and drought related. So, it's hard for people to believe that we could be dry given how much rain we had this spring, when that overwhelming moisture levels. But soils have dried out now. So if you're having trouble with a tree that's showing symptoms like this, you might want to go out, do some digging in the soil, and see how much moisture there really is in that soil. And I think you're going to be surprised to find it's drier than you expected. And if that's the case, then you're going to need to do some watering on these trees. Some good deep watering where you're trying to get the water down about 10 to 12 inches. You don't have to water the trees very often, though, is the thing. This is not like watering for turf. So you're going to water your trees about twice a month if the temperatures are in the 80s. If we get back up into the 90s, though, you might need to water about every 7 to 10 days. And you want to focus on the whole area from the trunk to the edge of the widest branch, or the drip line of the tree, all the way around the tree. In some cases, although the leaves are scorching, the underlying twigs and the buds on those twigs are still healthy and alive. So even if these leaves die, the branches may still be able to send out new foliage next year. So that would be the best case scenario. So I wouldn't prune out these branches real quickly. I would be a little patient, start watering your trees, and see how they come out next year.
All right, thanks, Sarah, and do your rain dance because Lincoln needs some rain.
Yeah.
All right, so here we come with 1, 2, 3 on grapevines. You have, what is this? Thanks for your time. That's your first picture. You have, what is this on my grapes? And you have, what is this on my grapes? So your first two, I think, were maybe close to the same thing, Wayne.
Well, you've got two things going on in this picture. You've got the top part there, which has the really interesting growths, and that is what we call grape hazelnut or grape filbert gall. And that's caused by a midge that gets in there, and the midge larvae feed and cause that growth. And then down on the leaves, you see all the little bumps and raises on the leaves. That's actually grape phylloxera. And that one is more akin to, they're like aphids, but not quite. They generally live on the rootstock, and during the summer they move up. And so the only way to control the grape phylloxera is resistant types of rootstocks. You want the American grape rootstocks because the European grape rootstocks tend to be susceptible.
All right, and I think all your other two
Yep,
pictures.
this is
were
other
the
pictures,
same.
better for our audience to see the same thing going on. It's that grape phylloxera on this one as well.
And I think a third
And then
one.
this nice close-up where you can see the backside of that leaf just absolutely covered with those knobby galls.
So there's not really anything they can do right now.
No, not at this time. It's all about selection up front and picking the right varieties with the right rootstocks.
Okay, excellent. Not good for the grape guys. All right, Bill, so here we are with turf
Yeah, and grass.
and grass. And your first two pictures are actually ones that are kind of good, but not really. So what do we think A and B, your first two pictures, are here?
You know, if you look at these, I'm kind of leaning towards either creeping bentgrass. Another one that we've thought about too is nimblewill, but I really don't think these first two will look like that. And then the third picture looks more like nimblewill. So the bentgrass is a cool season. The nimblewill is a warm season grass. And honestly, the things I just talked about in my sample, if you look at them really closely, they look very similar. The thing you'll notice is that the cool season nimblewill or bentgrass will green up earlier, and the nimblewill will green up later in the spring. So I actually have both of them right here. I don't know if you guys can get that quick, but you have bentgrass on this side, nimblewill on that side. They look really, really similar. But you have to control them differently. Use the same products, non-selective products like Roundup work. Mesotrione, tenacity also works, but you treat bentgrass starting in September, going into winter, so it's weak going into the winter and dies. Whereas the nimblewill you treat in the spring because it's weak out of the winter and dies before it can start to grow during the summer period. So same active ingredients, it looks similar, but you have to know which one you have to time out when you go out with your control products. But both really challenging weeds to control on the lawn.
Excellent, thanks, Bill. All right, Kyle, you have a series here that might bounce the other direction.
All right.
Your first three pictures are hawthorn tree with some issues, leaf tips browning, white things on the stem, and then you can see some more stuff going on here. And I think your third picture on this one actually also shows some funkiness going on.
Yeah, so at least as far as the kind of the orangey things on the leaves, those look like rust to me. And there are lots of different rusts out there. Pretty much for every plant out there, there is a rust that will infect it. And so it really does look like this is rust. Control for rust can be very difficult, especially once you start to see symptoms. And so we always talk about sanitation. So anything you can do to improve airflow through the canopy will help. But if you are looking at some sort of chemical control, you want to make sure you get that chemical control on quite early in the season, typically right around the time that the flowers are starting to bud and leaf out. As for the white things on there, I think those are mealybugs. And as typical, whenever I see something with legs or can move, I call up my entomology friends and say, Wayne, what do you do about mealybugs?
Well, with mealybugs, this one's tough to tell for sure if it's a mealybug or a soft scale. Generally, management's going to be similar for either one. You can try the hose method to wash them off if you can get a good enough blast up there to knock them off. Or if that's not going to work, you're going to want to look at a systemic insecticide because they have that waxy coating on the outside, that waxy growth that comes out, and that does tend to protect them a little bit from insecticide sprays. So you're going to need to get something that's going to be systemic and get inside the plants, so when they're drinking the sap out, they get exposed.
All right, excellent. And you have one more picture, which is, excuse me, Bruning, Nebraska viewer, and this is what our hollyhocks have.
One looks like more rust on the hollyhock as well. Again, we have these nice kind of orange pustules that are raised. I'm going to bet if you would rub your finger along those leaves, your finger would turn orange as well. As far as the hollyhock rust goes, one of the great ways that you can manage that one is really taking care of weed control. And so that hollyhock rust, it has one of the other hosts that it prefers are common mallow. And so if you do control the common mallow in the area, that should hopefully decrease the amount of rust that you end up having as well.
All right, thank you, Kyle. All right, Sarah, this is a viewer who wants ground cherries, and she started them indoors, transplanted. She's got flowers, but she doesn't have any ground cherries. So what do we think here?
Yeah, so this does look like ground cherry. The thing about ground cherries, though, is the fruit develops inside a papery husk that develops after the flowers are done. And it looks like your plants are starting to develop those. So I think you just need to be more patient. Ground cherry is kind of a late harvested plant. So typically they say they even taste a little bit better if they get a little frost on them. So it's just a little early in the season yet for you to be seeing those berries on there. And remember, they'll be inside the papery husks even when they're ripe. So I would wait till a little bit later in the season and then harvest. This is not a type of plant that's extremely productive. So you're not going to get buckets and buckets of berries on them. You'll get a few.
All right, thanks there. And your second one is also a what is this? This is Gosper County in South Central. She saw it at the county fair, and she's kind of hoping it will grow outside for her.
So this is an oxalis, an ornamental type of oxalis, or sometimes they're just commonly called shamrocks. This one is hardy to zone 6. So, most of Nebraska is in zone 5. So you'd have to find this a really protected location outside to grow it. It actually is grown much more often as a houseplant. So you probably do better just to have it as a houseplant.
All right, thanks, Sarah. As some areas of our state are still recovering from the effects of that historic, horrible flood we had, one city park and arboretum are doing just fine. Careful planning and thoughtful plant selection were really big reasons why Gilman Arboretum in Pierce was underwater this spring, but is now looking fantastic after the floodwaters receded. Here's park curator Gary Zimmer to tell us more.
Well, I started the Arboretum in 1993. It was when we did our first planting. I pretty much designed it in an area, just a bunch of wasted space out here. So we started in 1993, and then again 1994 was when the 2 years that we did the biggest amount of planting in it. And we've been adding ever since, both the landscape gardens and the trees and shrubs. There's a lot more than just natives here. I just wanted to plan have an educational place where people could see basically anything that grows here. We got some things that people have said, no, that tree won't grow here, and it's been here since 1993. I just wanted people to be able to go through and look at the labels and see things and get ideas for their own yards and businesses and whatever. We had all kinds of problems right where we're standing here. The water was probably about 3 feet deep right where we're standing here around the entrance, and we had some places down the road that were probably even deeper than that. This whole half of the Arboretum anyhow was originally designed as a storage area for water during high periods of high water. And when we have to shut the floodgates to keep, when the North Fork River starts coming back into town, we shut the floodgates. And this is all the water that's in town collects out here, and that's what it was designed for, was a storage area. So I knew that when I started. And that's the point there where you got to be really careful about what you put where. This area around the entrance here and farther down has been underwater many times since 1993, but yeah, I wanted to stress the right plant in the right place, and we've got places that where we know are going to get wet many times, and we got places that can be really dry. So we didn't lose a lot of stuff from the flood in March, because what's down here has been tried and tested, and well, the stuff was dormant. Most of the stuff was dormant then yet too, but there's a lot of things that weathered it really well. The bald cypress, most notably. I mean, this week was the first day that we've actually been able to mow around the bald cypress trees that are right behind you there, because it's been so wet, and they're going to handle it well. The aspens handle it well, tupelo, lots of different kinds of maples, and what kind of surprised me was the magnolias here, that the magnolias did real well. The water was 3 feet deep on those magnolias, and so we've got a lot of things that did really well, and we didn't really lose that much stuff, because if it was stuff that didn't belong here, we would have lost it a long time ago.
That's a really good example of knowing the place, knowing the plants, and marrying them one to the other. So that's a beautiful place. All right, Wayne, you have some picks here. Cukes. You have cucumbers in Blair. Leaves go from healthy and dark green to discolored, shrivels, and crunchy. They're showing discoloration. So what is that for those two?
Well, that looks like a very sad cucumber. And then as we go through these pictures, you get the next one, you can see the lightening of the leaf, the darker veins. And then we get into the last picture. And this is the part that really has me confused, is those stems splitting open like that. It's not a characteristic of squash vine borer.
That's a different viewer, though. So that's a different cucumber.
Right.
Yeah.
So that one is not that, but you look at the other one, and it could be bacterial wilt. This one's perplexing as to what it actually is, because it's not a standard bacterial wilt. It's not a standard squash vine borer. The first one could be bacterial wilt, but that's a Kyle question. I have the vector on that, so you protect from the vector. After you have it, Kyle can answer about that.
What's the vector?
The vector is striped or spotted cucumber beetle. They fly up from the south
Yep.
every year, so they don't overwinter here.
And unfortunately, with a lot of our bacterial diseases, there's not a whole lot that you can do in order to control them. So really the best thing to do is anything that you can do to prevent those spotted cucumber beetles from even showing up. Because that bacterial wilt, one of the great ways to kind of know that you have it is you'll go out and the plants will look nice and vigorous in the morning. And then as the day goes on, you go and check them in the afternoon, and there's just this mass wilting that you see. And if you cut them and then re-stick the vines together, you can slowly pull them apart and even see some of that bacterial ooze in there. And it's a bad one. So best thing to do is just keep the cucumber beetles out.
Yep, what you're looking at, floating row covers,
Okay.
or a spray schedule where you're not spraying on the flowers.
In other words, you're going to buy your cucumbers from somebody who knows how to grow them well.
Perhaps.
Okay. All right, Bill, this is a Hornick, Iowa viewer.
Alrighty.
She sent 3 different pictures, and I think your first one here and maybe the second one are, she used a riding mower to apply Trimec. She's wondering, is the striping because of the herbicide she did? And the third one here is she used a mixing rate that she was told to use. What do we have here? She said it went from deep green to this orangey brown and then pulled up immediately.
Yeah.
So what do we have going on here?
Well, this kind of color right now on grass really could be a lot of different things, but if you're really convinced it was the herbicide, and I look at some of the things she stated about the rates, and one of the things I want to just stress with people when you're using any type of a herbicide or any kind of pesticide is it's not just about how many ounces go into a gallon of water. The question is, how much does that 1 gallon of water treat? Does it treat 300 square feet, 1,000 square feet? Because ultimately that's going to have a big deal. If you put a lot in 1 gallon and you pour 1 gallon over 1 square foot, you could cause problems. And so we got to think more than just how many ounces go in a gallon. So figure out, maybe it takes 10 gallons to treat your lawn, and then figure out the square footage. Then you figure out how many ounces of product go in, and then you just go to spray. So like my backyard green takes 8 gallons. I know if I'm done with 8 gallons, I've sprayed the whole green, and I know I've covered 750 square feet, right? So that's what we have to think about, and not just worry about ounces to gallons. It should be ounces of product per area, thousands of square feet that we should be thinking about.
Excellent, good advice. Thanks, Bill. All right, Kyle, you get to bounce on this one too, I think.
Perfect.
This is a viewer in rural Butler County. She planted a plum about 3 years ago. She had a few plums last year, a lot of fruit this year. She's got 2 different pictures here. First one there's a couple plums, and second one there's a plum.
So I guess starting with this picture here, there's some of that clear ooze coming out of it. And last week we saw some of these on peaches, and we had talked about, there's a fungal pathogen, Coronium blight, that can cause similar symptoms. But this one does seem to be a little bit more due to an insect feeding. And so there are a few different insects, such as, was it plum curleo?
Plum curculio.
Plum curculio.
And also oriental fruit moth will cause the same type of damage where you get that clear ooze, and you can get it in peaches with oriental fruit moth. And same thing with plums. When you're looking at the plum curculio, you're looking for these crescent moon shaped excavations on that fruit, and that's where the egg has been laid, and then that will hatch and burrow in.
And that other one was brown rot?
Yeah, and so then the other one that we kind of skipped over there was brown rot, and brown rot is common on a lot of different stone fruits. Brown rot, it's caused by a few different fungi in the Mononilla genus, but typically they do like wounds in order to enter into that fruit. So any insect feeding, any sandblasting, high winds, that can all cause wounds that allow this fungus to enter into it. And unfortunately, that fungus, in addition to colonizing the fruit, it can also colonize the twigs. So you'll want to make sure, if you do have severe issues with brown rot, that to be checking those branches this fall once the leaves have dropped, and if you are seeing any cankers or any kind of sunken areas on those twigs, go ahead and prune them out. Make sure you're pruning out about 6 inches or so down below where that canker is, so you're removing all of that fungus. And hopefully next year you won't have near as many issues with brown rot.
All right, excellent.
Do we need to just bring you guys together during the break? Because I'm sitting here in the middle the whole time.
I feel like a third wheel.
Sounds great to me.
That is one of the beauties of rot spot or insect. It's like, okay, who did what to whom first?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm here in the middle enjoying it.
Smiling.
Yeah,
You're like the cream filling in the Oreo,
exactly.
you know? Everybody's favorite part.
All right, Sarah, your pictures here are a viewer from Omaha who planted this plant 12 to 14 years ago. She wants to know what it is. It leaves out. It really has never bloomed except for this year. So what is it?
This is a hydrangea, and one of the big leaf hydrangeas, which are not particularly hardy in Nebraska. You know, in recent years, they've been breeding more different hybrids of big leaf hydrangea, which have a little bit better winter hardiness. But even so, a lot of times the stems of these plants will die a lot in the winter. They'll die down quite a ways, and the flower buds can die. The flower buds are less winter hardy than even the foliage buds. So in some cases, the flower buds will die, and even if a part of the stem is still alive, there's no flower buds there to produce any flowers. So what they're seeing there is, this might be one of the big leaf hydrangeas that blooms on new wood. And so they're seeing some of the new growth was able to develop a flower bud later in the summer, like now, and so now you're seeing a flower on it this year. If you want this thing to bloom more, you're going to need to give it some serious winter protection to make sure that those stems and those flower buds survive better over the winter. And then you should see hopefully more flowers on it in years to come. But the big leaf hydrangeas are just problematic in Nebraska. They struggle with our winters.
Yeah, we don't like those baby blue and giant.
Yeah, they
pink
have
balls.
beautiful flowers, but they just don't like it in Nebraska.
I don't. You know, we all like to focus on our All-America selections and our vegetables on the west side of our backyard farmer garden. The eastern half gets a little bit overlooked, so let's take a minute to check out all of the perennial beauties out at the backyard farmer garden. This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, let's take a look at the end that is all perennials and woody plant material. It is absolutely beautiful this time of year. We have liatris in full flower. We have one of our rudbeckias down in the bottom of the rain chain. We have a beautiful white phlox called David, which is mildew resistant and really pops in the dark. The Russian sage, of course, is still going strong, as it will for a very long time. The sedums are beginning to flower. We have some plants that look like we forgot what we're doing, which is the shell leaf penstemon, and that's on purpose, so they can seed themselves and produce more plants for next year. We have blonde ambition blue grama still in full seed head, some agastache, and of course the Joe Pye weed, which is attracting all sorts of wonderful fluttering insects and pollinators. So that is what's happening in the Backyard Farmer Garden in the end that is perennials and woodies instead of annuals. Everything is bursting with color in that garden. If you have not visited this year, now is a great time to check it out. Before we do go to break, we want to remember a couple of good friends who actually passed away this year. And first of all, we have extension entomologist Dave Keith. He was a regular entomology panelist on the program for many years, always brought his insight as well as really a great sense of humor to the program. We also had our dear friend Gladys Jurink. She passed away this winter. You'll remember Gladys being in the phone room answering your questions, as well as bringing the most interesting ornamentals every week for the Plant of the Week. And of course, we're heartbroken over friends that have passed. Wouldn't have been the same show without Dave and Gladys. Or 6, get those questions in. While you do that, we will see who wins this week's lightning round. All right, Sarah, you're up.
Okay,
You ready?
I'm ready.
We have a Murray viewer who is really having a question about leaf curl in his oaks. What's going on with leaf curl in the oaks?
So the most common cause of leaf curl is herbicide injury, and that'll cause the leaves often to curl under. So that's what we would usually see.
All right. We have a viewer with a very old magnolia, needs a lot of pruning. His first question is, should he remove all of the bricks that are kind of around the base of this tree?
Yeah, if you created a raised planter, even if it's just a few inches around the base, it's better to just have the soil at the original grade. So I would take those out and smooth out the bed.
All right. A Nebraska City viewer has a maple that is already coloring up and losing its leaves. What's up with that?
So early leaf coloration is also another stress symptom similar to the scorch that I mentioned earlier. So I would look at your watering and see if that is an issue with the tree.
All right. A Kearney viewer is wondering if she can eat the tomatoes that set on after the flooding receded.
Yes, if the tomatoes were not in the floodwaters and it's been, 90 days since the floodwaters receded, then you should be okay. I would say don't eat these tomatoes fresh, cook them, and don't can them.
All right. Excellent. Nice job, Sarah. Ready?
Always.
Did you get all that fur out of your mouth?
It's still a little bit dusty in there, but that's okay.
Okay. So we have a Bellevue viewer, Kyle, who says the trunks on his apple trees are turning black. What's up with that?
Could be fire blight. Typically, whenever we see black on a malice, fire blight.
All right. This is a Lincoln viewer who says they're seeing tiny black dots on the wall of the school and they won't pick off. What's that?
Some sort of mold. Without seeing a sample, I really can't tell you any more than that, unfortunately.
Okay. We're having people send in questions about rusty spots on their pear leaves. What is that?
That is ornamental pear rust.
And how do you actually take care of that?
That's one of those you want to, if you are looking for a fungicidal control, you'll want to spray early in the year, right as those flower blossoms are beginning to open.
All right. We have a 40-year-old spruce with the interior branches dying. Is there a way to stop that decline?
It probably not. So there are a few different diseases that will affect the interior needles of spruces. But if you really care about it and want the extra expense, you can do a fungicide spray.
Nice job. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
You always think I'm going to beat up on you. I'm not doing that.
I mean, I'm always nervous.
All right. We have a Sioux City viewer who wants to know how to kill purslane.
You can kill purslane with pretty much any of the three-way herbicides.
All right. How often should a newly seeded spot be watered?
You just want to keep the seed wet. So you don't want it doesn't need to be soaked all the time. So maybe more frequently, the bigger the seed, maybe a couple times a day. Small seeds, it would be 3-4 times a day.
All right.
But lightly.
All right. In Omaha, how do you kill chameleon plant?
It'd be the glove of death with some kind of a non-selective herbicide. Be very careful, but just treat just that one.
All right. Can you plug or seed zoysia grass in September? Is that the right season?
No, it's a warm season grass, so we do that in the spring going into the warm season, which is the summer.
All right. This is a viewer in Sioux City who wants to know whether they should cut and till or just cut before they sod.
It's going to be tough to till. I'd rather try to kill it off and cut it low and then try to kill it off and then sod on top of that. But I wouldn't till if you don't need to, honestly.
Okay, nice. No, you're not going to get all yes and no answers. All right.
The guy can ask.
This is a viewer from Ord who wonders whether she needs to let her milkweed stand all winter for the monarchs or should she remove it?
Wait till the flight starts south, and then you can remove it. Once that flight starts south in late August and early September, you can remove it.
All right, describe a brown recluse spider for a Lincoln viewer.
Nearly hairless, 8 legs, light tan brown with, on the cephalothorax, which is the combined head and thorax, a fiddle. That's a darker brown.
All right.
Yes.
This is a Omaha viewer who wonders how to get rid of what they think are powder post beetles that got into a picture frame.
They hit older, untreated wood. You need to seal the wood.
All right. Do cicada killer wasps eat or just scare Japanese beetles? This is Omaha.
I highly doubt they scare them, and they do not eat them.
Okay. This is a Central City viewer who wonders whether they can eat the fruit if Japanese beetles ate the leaves.
No problems there. Eat
All
away.
right. What are the caterpillars with the giant fake eyes?
Eastern tiger swallowtail. Big yellow butterflies you see floating around.
Excellent. Is it too late? You get to answer this one. To treat for bagworms.
No, it's not. As
Okay.
long as the caterpillars are still actively feeding, you can use a product that contains carbaryl, because when they feed on that, they'll ingest it and it will still get to them. Your topicals like permethrins will not work as well because they're protected inside the bags.
Excellent. Thank you. Sarah, plant of the week.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, who won?
Yep.
All right, pull it up. You can put it in front of you. And now, Sarah, you can talk plant of the week.
Yeah, turn it around so they can see the front.
Nope.
There you go.
Clearly, you haven't won.
No.
Okay, Sarah.
So we have a nice collection here. The white flower here in front, this is one of our tall garden phlox. They usually get about 2 to 2.5 feet tall, sometimes up to about 3. This is a particular cultivar called David. It's this white flower right here, the kind of clustered one. David is a really excellent cultivar because it's very powdery mildew resistant. And we oftentimes see other varieties of tall garden phlox just being almost eaten up by powdery mildew, and they look really ratty at this time of year. But this particular cultivar does very well, and the foliage stays nice and green looking, and so and it adds a great pop of white to your garden. So it's a wonderful perennial, to think about adding to your garden. The taller, more airy looking plant here is a catmint. These are the flowers of catmint. And they're great for pollinators. Bees and butterflies and moths and all sorts of pollinating types of insects and butterflies just love them when they're in bloom, and they'll just be covered with it. This particular plant is over by Love Library, the south side of Love Library. So if you'd like to take a look at them, you can see them there. There's quite a few different cultivars of catmint, and they can have a nice flush of flowers in the spring, and then if those flowers have all faded, you can cut them down and let them grow back, and they'll rebloom again later in the summer. Okay.
Excellent. One tiny correction.
Okay.
That's calamint, which is related to catmint.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
And in the mint family.
Okay.
So, yeah, but everything else about it was perfect.
Great. And the Malabar spinach, do we want to talk about
yeah,
that?
Malabar.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this viney thing here in the front is Malabar spinach. And it's not actually truly related to spinach. It's a plant that comes from Asia, China, but the leaves are used a lot like spinach, and so you can harvest them and you can eat them in salad and as greens. And it likes full sun, and it's very frost sensitive, so it's a plant that you need to plant after any danger of frost is past, and then usually they're seeded in the garden. And once the weather gets warm, they'll start to grow really, really fast.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. And that, by the way, is one that's been living in that vase since last week. So we're going to see if it'll live 6 weeks in the vase. All right, you have A, B, C, D, and E. So we're going to, and F. Yeah, we're going to go right through these quick.
All right.
First is a thornless hawthorn. Look at these great pictures
Woolly
on
aphids.
this one. Yeah, what does she do about that?
Hose works great. Again, covered in wax, so not necessarily the best thing to topical spray.
Okay, and I think your next picture maybe is a purple leaf cherry of some sort. What's on this one?
This looks like it should be pear slug or pear sawfly.
Okay.
That characteristic feeding where they scrape off the top and leave the bottom is pretty normal for their type of feeding. Oh, they're telling us to go on.
Yeah. So this one is what C and D here are. This is a viewer who chopped down this tree,
Yes.
found these grubs in the wood.
So this is rotting wood. So these are decomposers. These are not something we need to worry about. but these are a type of flat-headed boar, excuse me. I always forget. Round, they're
Round
round.
is round and flat is flat.
Flats,
Wayne,
they've got a flat
round
front.
and round and
Right. They have a round flat spot on the front if they're round, a flat-headed board, and then they're a round if they're the round. Yes, it's confusing.
but they're just fine. in
They're a
the dead wood.
decomposer since they're in the rotting wood, and I wouldn't worry about them.
All right, and then we have, this is really cool. This is actually from South Dakota, and sent in a picture of his mother's cherry tree. And this is the close-up of the foliage, and the whole tree itself looks exactly like this.
This is fantastic damage from pear slug. You can even see it moving over onto the tree next door. Pear slugs will hit apple and pear, as well as cherry and plum. Those rosaceous fruits we like so much, they'll occur on a lot of those. Again, you're looking for what looks like a little wet green drop almost on those leaves. They spray off really well with the hose, so it's something you can wash off that way.
Early, before the tree.
Before the damage, but unfortunately most of the time people don't notice until the damage is already there.
All right, thank you, Wayne. All right, this is a Lincoln viewer bill. Says the seed germinated really irregularly in this seed mat, so it's one of those straw mats with the threads in between it. They're wondering, should they pull the mat up? Should they seed into it? How do you deal with this sort of a situation?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're probably a little early on the seed window. It's been a little hot, and so making sure you have uniform soil water there is going to be an issue. The mat might help. And so if I were you and you're unhappy with it, I would definitely pull it up and then make sure the seed is good. We're going to have poor germination for two reasons. The seed is bad, or you're not getting uniform water. So if you know the water is good, then maybe think about getting some newer seed that is likely to going to survive, and put that mat back down to help retain that moisture with the kind of drier weather we've seen in parts of the state.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Yep.
This is a Millard area viewer, Kyle, who got hit hard, unfortunately, with the hail. This is a 4-year-old Colorado aspen tree, seeing hail damage throughout the trees. He's got 5 of these. They haven't leafed out. Every limb has some damage. He's really wondering about, the fungal issues associated with this, with the aspen, and whether they will survive.
Yeah, it really looks like we do have a canker there. Canker ID can be difficult, but I think it's probably a black canker. Where we have that bark that's kind of flaring out around the edges is typical of black canker. And aspens, poplars are very susceptible to black canker as well. And unfortunately, if you are seeing pretty severe injury to a lot of trees, then they may not come out of it. Aspens are really, they're not a Nebraska tree. So talk about choose the right plant for the right place, and they belong kind of on a mountainside, and Nebraska is not really on a mountainside. So I would maybe start thinking about something else to plant in that area.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, Sarah, you have 3 pictures of autumn blaze maples here. There are 2 of them in his backyard in Omaha. Branches are splitting, the trunk is splitting, the leaves are getting eaten. He thought it was Japanese beetles originally, but that actually started before they hatched, and it doesn't really explain the splitting of the branches. So what do we think is going on with this tree?
Yeah, Japanese beetles wouldn't cause this kind of damage. They don't cause bark splitting. So maples are really prone to these types of this type of bark damage because they tend to be rather thin barked when they're young. And so this could be bark that has died in the winter when that side of the tree got warm, and then as temperatures dropped at night, the cells, water crystallized in there between the cells and caused that bark to rupture and die. Or it could be, there could be a borer in there of some kind and tunneling underneath that section of bark, and as that bark died and the tree continued to grow, the bark splits across the tunneled section where the borer has been active. So maples are just kind of prone to this type of damage. There's really not much you can do about the dead section of bark on the trunk, but on the secondary branches, if it's in a place where you can prune it out, you can do that. You can prune out those damaged branches. I think basically it's going to go back to good care for this tree, just making sure that it stays watered and mulched and you're giving it good secondary care. Ideally, what will happen is that tree will start to send out callus tissue and hopefully seal over that damaged section of bark. that would be the best outcome if that happens.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, you know, some folks just don't like snakes. They do strike a lot of fear in a lot of gardeners, but you also have to keep in mind that they are really beneficial for the most part around our homes by eating a lot of pests. Dennis is here to tell you what you might want to do to keep them around, but he does offer a few suggestions to help keep them away.
We're going to talk about garter snakes, one of the most common snakes in Nebraska. We do have 4 types of garter snakes, but what most people see around cities and towns and around their homestead is the plains garter snake. The plains garter snake and the common garter snake are found statewide. The way to tell it's a garter snake in Nebraska, 3 distinct lines down the body. Those lines could be any color. Now, the one thing about these snakes, they virtually carry no germs, viruses, fleas, or ticks that will transfer to people, and they're beneficial. They eat earthworms and insects. So their teeth are very small, less than 1/8 of an inch. If you see them, let them be. However, if you're one of those people who have trouble letting them be in your yard, even though they're completely beneficial and harmless, there is some things you can do to discourage them from getting in your home and being around your landscape. And one of the only things that work is exclusion. If you have rock walls that are loose, they love that. If you have railroad tie walls or tie walls that are very loose, they also like that to reproduce in. So go to a tight landscaping. Also, they love tall grass. Keeping the grass well groomed and low will also discourage the garter snakes. Now, around the house, you can use different types of landscaping. You don't want to use things like river rock. They like the river rock. They can get down in the river rock. They can actually have their babies in the river rock. So that I would discourage the river rock up next to the house when it comes to garter snakes. Wood chips they also love, because wood chips would attract insects, and they love those insects. That's like a bed and breakfast. The one kind of landscaping they seem to dislike the most is lava rock. This sharp rock, they don't like to crawl across it, and they don't like to crawl into it because it cuts up that very tender scale in the front of their face. So lava rock, about 6 inches deep, 2 foot out from the house, is not the greatest landscaping for plants, but it's excellent for keeping snakes away from the house. The other thing is, you sometimes, and every year I get several people calling me that snakes get in their house. So around the outside, you may want to put this, some kind of device like this, around your dryer vent, because as it gets cooler, they want to get up in that nice warm dryer vent. If you have aluminum siding or vinyl siding that warms up, this device can go in the corners. They love to go up in the corners of that siding if it's within 2 foot of the ground. So these can be purchased and put up underneath the corner of the siding to stop them from going up. Okay, if you think a garter snake has gotten into the home, there's several places you can look. The most prominent place would be the basement or first floor. They like to go where it's warm and moist, under a dishwasher, under a hot water heater, under some place where there's a lot of moisture and heat, maybe by the furnace. Another thing you can do is use baking soda or talc powder, put it down in areas where you think it may be, and then the next morning look for tracks to see which way the snake went. Once you find a place where the snake could be, there's several ways you can capture it. You can put a towel, a crumped up towel that's moist in a corner in a dark place, and stretch another towel over it. Or you can use what we call a snake glue board, which is just a board that has glue and stripes. The snake goes into this small snake glue board, gets stuck, and then you bring it outside, put vegetable oil on it, and the snake is released. So if snakes are around the yard, first thing, education. Try to educate yourself to live with them and enjoy their beneficial attributes. If you still can't seem to live with them in your yard, in your area, there's several things you can do to keep them away. Remember, don't spend money on a lot of things like repellents, because most of those have been proven not to work. Go with exclusion. Exclusion is your best friend when you don't want the snakes around.
So those few suggestions will hopefully help you keep snakes away and out of your home. Do remember, most of the snakes in Nebraska aren't harmful. They're just scary if you don't like them. All right, Wayne, Couple questions here. The first is, are these stink bugs? And if so, what are the organic methods for control and protection to keep them from coming back next year? So,
Well,
is it a stink bug?
First, yes, it's a stink bug. Second, it's a brown marmorated stink bug, one of our nasty invasives. If you're looking for organic methods, it's going to be called a bucket of soapy water that you knock them down into
All right.
to remove them physically.
Okay, and your second one is on a zucchini leaf on the underside. They're quite shiny and copper colored. Should she leave
I
them or
have to
destroy?
compliment the picture taker on
Yeah.
this. That's a great scale item in there. Those are squash bug eggs. Proceed with your finger, and thumb and forefinger, and squish.
All right. Bill, this is a flood question
Okay.
and a picture. This is a Plattsmouth viewer. This is what the soil looks like after the flood receded. They do want to prepare for seeding this fall. So what do they do?
Yeah, I think, it seems fine. It's just dry. That's why it's cracking like that. There's probably some silt there, so you'll see some silt clay cracking. Just kind of rake it up. If you need to till to smooth it out, do that. Otherwise, just get in with some kind of a seeder, get some seed down into it, and then lightly rake the soil back on top, water, and you should have grass a couple weeks.
All right, excellent. And when is that seeding window, by
Yeah,
the
we're a
way?
little early still, so
Okay.
let's go mid-August for most of the state. Cool season grasses, yep.
All right, excellent. All right, Kyle, you have a couple of pictures here. The first is a foaming and bubbling tree.
Yeah, so
And what is this?
this is great. This is slime flux, also known as wetwood. But there's a whole bunch of different bacteria that can colonize the wood of the tree. They're not pathogenic though, so it's not harming the overall health of the tree. What happens though is in the summer, the pressure inside of the tree builds up due to methane gas production, and then they'll find any sort of crack or branch crotch or something like that in order to escape. And then that's just the bacteria and water kind of foaming down the tree.
Does it explode?
It does not explode.
Methane.
It is methane, so maybe don't light a match underneath it.
All right. And your second one is also something rather strange. This is on the base of his pepper plant.
Yeah, and this is beautiful. And so I think here we have slime mold, and slime molds, they really like a lot of moisture, and so not at all a surprise to see them show up in a garden, especially if you are doing that watering from the base. But those slime molds aren't going to harm your plant. Once it dries out, the fungus will go away and you won't see it anymore.
All right, excellent. Sarah, yours are sort of mundane after all that weirdness. Okay. But this is a viewer in Council Bluffs who has yews. These are on the east side of his house. He thinks they're out of control, sorry. When and how severely can he prune them?
Ideally, you're not going to prune them any farther back than there's still green needles. I mean, you want to leave some green foliage on the branches. So, and I would, people always hate to hear me say this, but I would not do this pruning with a hedge trimmer. I would do it with hand pruners so that you can create a more natural effect by pruning back to secondary side shoots and create more of a natural, airy looking effect to it. The trick to pruning in the fall is not pruning too late, because if you prune too late, like into September, the plants have enough time to start putting on new growth, and that new growth is not very winter hardy. And so then we can see that new growth dying when you come into the spring and you've got all these ugly brown dead tips. So I would probably wait until things start to cool off a little bit in late August and then prune, and then let it go until next year. And if you need to do any additional pruning or any additional, size reduction, then do it next year after they put out their new growth.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, we always have announcements of fun things going on in the gardening world, and the first one, I believe, starts with us, and that is our Grow Row produce donations. We are still accepting those Tuesdays from 5 to 7 in the Backyard Farmer Garden on East Campus. Our second one is totals for this year so far from the Backyard Farmer Garden, 689 pounds, and from Grow a Row, which is 245 pounds, so that's really great. And our third one, of course, is Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. You can watch us on Facebook, Sundays, 6:30 p.m. Central. Follow us on Backyard Farmer in Net, Nebraska on Facebook, and it's going to be a really fun one. It's nutrition and gardening, so it's nutrition Nutrition and School Gardenings. We have time for one quick question, and Kyle, I'm going to pick on you
Okay.
on this one. So what fungicides can be used for late blight in tomatoes?
Yeah, I think last week I may have mentioned that propiconazole could be used for late blight control, and unfortunately there aren't any propiconazole products that are registered for the garden. So whenever you're applying a fungicide or any pesticide, always need to follow that label because the label is the law. So really, fungicides for late blight, chlorothalonil, such as is in Bravo, works pretty well. Otherwise, some copper products work too.
Excellent. So nice to admit your mistakes.
It's always the best.
And Funginil would be the the product that people would find
In
that
the
has
garden
that in it in the garden center.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, thanks.
Since homeowners would be able to buy Bravo. Yeah.
Excellent.